So, a lot of you guys really seem to enjoy watching me read and react to terrible reviews for controversial movies. Well, some of the comments asked me to look at terrible reviews for great movies. So, without further ado, let's look at some terrible reviews for Halloween. Hey, what's up, everybody? It's Nick here from the Lost River Drive-In, and today we're going to go over some terrible reviews for the original Halloween. This was requested to me by a couple of different people in the comments saying I should do this. Now, with any movie, there are terrible reviews. Like, there just are. However, there are certain movies that are undeniable classics that 99.99% of the population would say, yeah, that's just a genuinely good movie. Halloween 1978 is one of those movies. But even then, there are still bad reviews for this movie. It was not hard to find them. So, I've got them pulled up next to me. It's time that you and I go through them. You're going to watch me live react. And yes, I'm going to give feedback on some of these terrible reviews. So, our first review comes from someone named Senna D. They gave it a half star and said, despite the ravishing performance of a young Miss Curtis, this story has a completely uninteresting storyline, mind-numbingly stupid characters, a ridiculous plot, a totally unrealistic motive, and shockingly bad acting to top it all off. This film is absolutely the worst horror film I've ever seen. Honestly, don't know why it has such a big following. Whoo! Okay, so we're coming out guns blazing here. All right, so first of all, there is no motive. That's kind of the beauty of it. The motive didn't happen until Halloween 2. Dumb characters, maybe Linda. Annie does some dumb stuff. I feel like Jamie Lee's pretty smart in this movie. Terrible acting? I don't know about that, man. Jamie Lee's good. Donald Pleasance is really good. No. And sorry, if this is one of the worst horror movies you've ever seen, you have not watched a lot of horror movies, my friend. Yikes. Brent A comes in with a half-star review and says, 10% rating. Not a fan of the horror genre because I typically find the storyline to be bland with a bunch of dull characters. This fits the bill, in my opinion. The characters were mind-numbingly stupid. Again with the mind-numbingly. About halfway through, I was rooting for Michael Myers. Okay, so rooting for Michael Myers would not make the movie bad. I root for Michael Myers. Quite often, actually, in these movies, and even the first time I watched them. Not being a fan of the genre, I don't know why you sought this out then. Or you seek any horror movie out. Because if you just don't like horror movies, don't watch them. That's like me with a lot of rom-coms. I don't go out of my way to watch them because I've just never been a huge fan. Sorry, Brent, but no. Jim C. comes in with a 1-star review and says, the beginning 5 minutes was the best bit, and the rest was a massive waste of my time. Like, I know it's 1978, but for the love of God, it wasn't even scary. But the end was actually quite good now that I think about it. 2 exclamation points. That review was all over the place. Like, hey, the opening is great. Oh, the end is great. But oh my God, this is a waste of time. A massive waste of time. It wasn't even scary. I don't know, man. I don't know. All right, this next one is an Italian name, so I might butcher this. Gianvito A gives it 1 star and says, I don't understand why this movie is considered one of the best horror movies of all time. It was so boring and slow. For 1 hour, Michael Myers looked like more of a stalker than a killer. Okay. All right. Yeah, it's kind of the point. Sebastian L comes in with 2 stars and says, honestly, I don't get it. Why do people hold this in such high regard? It's not scary, well written, well directed, or well shot, and it's unnecessarily slow. I usually love films considered cult classics because you can see the elements that attracted a following, but I can't get my head around this one. Curtis provides the little credibility this movie has. So, again, the issue here when you're going over reviews is like opinions you can't really argue. Like if something works for somebody, it works for them, and if it doesn't, same situation. But there are certain things with certain movies that you can't argue. And to say that Halloween is not well shot is just, it is a blatant lie. Like it is factually incorrect. Dean Cundey is a master with the camera, okay? He is a great DP, always has been. You know a Dean Cundey movie when you're watching a Dean Cundey movie. Even for a film that was shot in 1978, using the Steadicam, like, for the first time, no, I'm sorry, Sebastian. If you don't like it, that's awesome, but do not lie.
Hey, Lonnie, get your ass away from there.
Carson H. comes in with 1 star and says, this movie is considered a classic, but there's not much story, plot, or motive. It seems like Michael Myers wants to kill just for the sake of killing. Richard B. comes in with 1 star and says, regardless of when it was released, the acting is terrible. The plot is thin, and it wasn't scary in the slightest. At least with other older horror, you can understand how it would have been perceived as scary. Blandest hour and a half I've spent in the horror genre. Okay, so Richard, you haven't watched a lot of films from the late 70s, early 80s, I would take it, because a lot of them are slow burns like this. Again, with the acting, what are people seeing that I'm not seeing? Am I just blinded? Like, the acting is not bad in Halloween. At worst, it's serviceable.
You know, it's Halloween. I guess everyone's entitled to one good scare, huh?
They're really testing my patience tonight. They really, really are, guys. Luke's Family and Friends comes in with 2.5 stars and says, it is painfully boring. Slow pacing, not scary, average kills, but has good acting, and of course, Michael Myers. I want to like it, but I just can't. It's overrated. Yeah, Luke, well, your Family and Friends are probably overrated, bro, so what? Daniel C. enters the fold with a 2-star review and says, the soundtrack of the movie is spectacular, just perfect, but the rest of the movie itself is boring. All right, so this is a good review, and I wasn't going to read it, but I saw something at the end when I was proofreading, and I was like, I'm going to read it. Lance H. gives 4.5 stars and says, absolute horror classic. Quintessential slasher that's still the best ever made. Also, coming on here to warn everyone to not watch Halloween Ends because it was beyond offensive, insulting, and explicable.
He got hungry.
Fabian E. comes in with a 2-star review and says, boring movie from start to finish. The only good thing is the music and Michael Myers. Everything else is bad. Moments that try to give a terrifying atmosphere and fail. Good music, but there are scenes where they misuse it. How do you... Ilib K comes in with a 2-star review and says, overrated. The birth of the stupid characters horror trope. You know there are many horror films before this with laughably bad decisions from characters, right? Does Caleb know? I don't think he knows. Daniel M. enters the fold with a 2-star review and says, there wasn't much that interested me. I didn't like that Myers was a basic serial killer and not a monster like Freddy. Maybe I'll try the series again in the future. But serial killers have a pattern, and Michael Myers really doesn't. And there was no motive here. Kind of is a monster. He's just alive. Okay, Daniel.
For God's sakes, he can't drive a car. He was doing very well last night. Maybe someone around here gave him lessons.
Right. Now, clearly this person intentionally left their name off because they didn't want this to come back on them somehow, some way down the line. So, anonymous reviewer gives it a 0.5 star and says, this movie sucks so bad. In the whole movie that for some reason is rated 18 plus, 3 people die. It's not gruesome at all, and OMG, this woman's acting, I mean horrible. The cliches in this movie are just embarrassing. She is not convincing at all, and I just did not enjoy the movie one bit. It's boring and there are no jump scares. Not even close to a good horror movie. Yeah, okay, Anon shitposter on Rotten Tomatoes says because there's not a bunch of jump scares and gratuitous gore, it's not even close to a good horror movie. So I don't know who you think you are, walking around talking about how Halloween 1978 is this friggin' masterpiece. Anon shitposter just said, you're wrong, buddy. Another anonymous poster comes in with a 2-star review and says, decent movie, but terribly made. Music and sound effects were way too loud. Voices, people talking, was way too quiet. was increasing and decreasing the volume every couple minutes. Shut up. Okay, another anonymous poster comes in with a half-star review and says, I'm not denying that it's a classic, but just because you were the first to do something doesn't mean you were ultimately the best at it. This, right here, my friends, is a classic case of probably someone that is either a hardcore Friday or Nightmare fan. Because how you can acknowledge that a film is a classic and give it a half star, you've automatically lost all credibility. And your reason being, yeah, well, just because you did it before these ones doesn't make you better. Like, are you a petulant child? And maybe they are. Maybe they are. I mean, it's a verified reviewer, but maybe they are a child. I don't know. That sour grapes mentality about Halloween is really weird. Like, really weird. Or about any movie. But, like, also, Halloween wasn't the first to do it, guys. Peeping Tom, Psycho, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Black Christmas, they all have elements of what became the modern slasher film. So, while Halloween was probably the biggest of its time, it wasn't the first. But your review sucks. And alright, this will be our last one. This is from another anonymous poster that gives it 1 star and says, this movie was terrible. No backstory, no character development. I thought this was boring to watch. Okay? So the overarching theme I'm finding here with the people that are rating this movie negatively is very simple. A lot of people found it boring. They found it slow. They didn't feel like there was a lot to grab onto there. That's the beauty of Halloween. That was the point of Halloween. It's a very minimalistic movie. It is a movie that is about theater of the mind. It's not what you see. It's what you don't see. It's what your mind draws conclusions about. It's going from A to B up here, not actually seeing it on screen. Also, to say it isn't scary, well, then it's just not your type of horror. But I've spoken to people that saw this movie in theaters in its original run. And I'm sure there's people watching this video that saw this movie in theaters back in the day. And it was just different back then. Americana was different back then. The idea that somebody could just break out of a mental institution and come to a small town and just kill people just because scared a lot of people, including babysitters like my mom, who was a babysitter and saw this movie as a teenager in theaters, and it scared the crap out of her. So I understand why a lot of people are like, oh, and it's this generation, you know, oh, it's not that scary, oh, it's slow, it's blah, 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 blah. You're never going to be able to change somebody's mind on that. This isn't their horror, and that's okay. They prefer a more modernized take on horror, and that's fine. But the one guy that said it's a classic, but just because it was the first doesn't mean it's the best and gave it a half star, I'm going to find that guy.
You can get back in there and get back on that telephone, tell him exactly who walked out of here last night, and tell him exactly where he's going.
So the point of this video was to show that even these movies that are revered classics, and they are loved by damn near everybody, there are people that hate them. And some of them are for petty reasons, some of them are actually legitimate reasons. A lot of what you heard here, it's not legitimate reasons. It's about taste, or it's just being petty. But you guys wanted to see this. You wanted me to flip the script a little bit, pick a great movie, and read bad reviews for a great movie. And as you saw, I was just poking fun, but some of them were genuinely like mind-numbing. In their outlandishness, you know, like I just can't even wrap my head around it. But I want to hear what you guys thought about this twist on what I had been doing. Did you like it? Do you want to see more? Comment that down below in the comments section. Make sure to leave a like on the video. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. This is Nick. I thank you so much for stopping at the Lost River Drive-In, but I'm pulling out.